our support to inform us that we are live. Okay, and we are live. Let me just go ahead and record this meeting, this hearing. My apologies. Good afternoon. It is 1:00 p.m. on November 6th, 2024, and this is the public hearing for the proposed fee structure for the Guam Cultural Repository, which is being held in the silent room on the second floor of UOG's RFK Library. I am Kayleen Roberto, Board of Regents Liaison. Presiding over this hearing is the chairperson of the UOG Board of Regents Budget, Finance, and Audit Committee, Regent Mike Nahalawa. For the record, public notice of this hearing was published in the Guam Daily Post on Thursday, October 24, 2024. 5 hard copies of the proposed fee structure and the economic impact statement have been on file with the Office of the President, Room 246, School of Business and Public Administration Building, UOG Station, Manila, Guam, and have been available for individuals to examine them there, or members of the public may have requested a copy of the proposed fee structure and economic impact statement by sending an email request to me at robertok@triton.uog.edu. A copy of the proposed fee structure and economic impact statement was posted online at url.uog.edu/UV91AQ. Thank you, and Regent Nahalawa will now start today's hearing.
Good afternoon. Are there any persons who would like to submit testimony regarding the proposed fee structure for the Guam Cultural Repository? Yes, please.
Buenas. My name is Dr. Kelly Marsh-Taitano, and I am here to provide an overview and understanding of the fee structure that's being proposed for the Guam Cultural Repository. So first, I want to start with acknowledgements. The Guam Repository team wants to acknowledge and thank Dean Monique Story, the UOG Legal Counsel, Dean Roseanne Jones, the Guam Museum, the Guam Historic Preservation Office, Mark Library, the Hagatna Public Library, and others who provided guidance in the development of this fee structure. So if we could move to the next slide, we'll just go over the outline. So the statement of purpose, Isagan Pandipusitan Kotarat Guahan, or the Guam Cultural Repository, will receive, maintain, and provide long-term curatorial services for archaeological materials and associated historical documents related to the culture, history, and heritage of Guahan, and some degree, potentially its surrounding areas. The repository will operate a dedicated research room, provide laboratory space, develop cultural and academic programs in collaboration with the Department of Chamorro Affairs and the University of Guam, including a website to access photos and 3D scans of artifacts so that they may be accessed around the world, and maintain a robust interactive community outreach program. These resources will be accessible to the Chamorro people, researchers, and community members for cultural, educational, and scientific purposes. Collections at Isagan Pandipusitan Kotarat Guahan will be available for study by Indigenous Chamorros, academic and community researchers, for loan to institutions for museum exhibits, and for related museum-affiliated public programs. The use of these collections is a high priority as emphasized in local and federal standards. Isagan Pandipusitan Kotarat Guahan is the first government of Guam repository that will meet the local and federal repository guidelines and standards, which has long been sought by the Guam Historic Preservation Office, the Guam Museum, and the community of Guam at large. So moving on to the next section, reasoning and calculation of costs. For the reasoning, the proposed rates and fees reflect the expenses incurred by Isagan Panpusitan Coturagua in providing its services. These rates are designed to recover the costs of service provision without subsidizing external entities. Fees for services such as image duplication, collection intake, curation, and other repository services are essential for sustaining the operations of archaeological repositories such as Guam's, supporting the maintenance and preservation of cultural heritage resources and associated records themselves, ensuring their long-term conservation, access, and use. These fees are an investment in their sustained maintenance. These fees will also serve as funds for proactive replacement of the costly specialized equipment required to conserve and care for ancestral and historical artifacts and their associated records. To run the repository to local and federal standards, for example, we have 2 generators, we have an HVAC system, we're working on a backup HVAC system, among many other requirements. These fees support public access to cultural heritage, ensure the preservation of archaeological and archival materials, and help maintain cultural identity for future generations. These fees align with the overarching goal of effective resource allocation and management in cultural heritage stewardship. So for the calculation itself, proposed rates and fees are primarily structured around personnel, facility, personnel, facility, and associated operational costs. These calculations are based on research and on communication with like institution fee structures and current data that we have been gaining since our inception to ensure that they reflect the scope of services we are to provide. They are also based on over 20 years of archaeological field and laboratory experience and dry run tests of the time and materials needed for processing collection submissions, as well as months of guidance by Dean Roseanne Jones, who is a tenured professor of economics and has prepared other fee structures, such as for WARI. So there are 2 main considerations which guided our fee structure calculation. First was striving to recover costs to achieve a level of sustainability, really focusing, as I mentioned earlier, on the maintenance needs to keep our ability to meet local and federal standards. Second, we really worked at balancing this with affordability, particularly for students, cultural practitioners, indigenous and community researchers, and nonprofit organizations. For example, for some of the rates that we'll be going over, there are Guam resident rates of 50% or more that may be also applied to students, cultural practitioners, and nonprofits. So entities that are directly affected, the third category. The proposed rates and fees will directly affect development project sponsors, including Government of Guam agencies and cultural resource management firms engaged by these sponsors. These increases will benefit both project sponsors and the people of Guam by supporting the long-term curation of displaced artifacts and associated records, which might otherwise be vulnerable to being degraded or lost over time. Guam law prohibits mandating private landowners to submit displaced archaeological material to the Government of Guam, in this case being the repository, and to pay fees for their curation. To comply with this law and to encourage landowners to deposit archaeological materials, the repository will waive fees for such deposits, and this waiver is limited to private or commercial landowners and not any government landowners. This aligns with the goal of returning cultural heritage to the people of Guam, ensuring the preservation and public accessibility of artifacts and associated records, and fostering collaboration in cultural conservation. Importantly, in the assessment that we carried out, we observed no adverse economic impact. as the focus remains on leveraging cultural heritage to drive positive cultural, academic, and economic outcomes. So getting to the benefits to the community of many we see, there are numerous. By preserving ancestral and historical artifacts and associated records, the repository supports cultural practitioners and entrepreneurs connected to Guam's heritage, fostering growth in this sector of our economy, which has grown substantially over the years. In fact, one of the repository's goals is to actively help recapture, maintain, and promote Chamorro cultural traditions, including crafting jewelry such as spondylus pendants and sinahi, as well as fishing tools, pottery, and slingstone. So we don't intend to make those ourselves, but we intend to work with the cultural practitioners and those in the cultural industries, connect with their ancestral heritage so that they can move forward making modern heritage that respects that. These resources will be accessible to the Chamorro people, researchers, and community members for cultural, educational, and scientific purposes. Preservation of archaeological and associated records helps maintain our cultural and community identity for future generations. So, as I mentioned, numerous benefits. And so what I'd like to do is show a few slides just showing some of the movement forward, and then we can go over the review of proposed fees. So if we could see the next slide. So really our intention is, as much as possible, yes, it's preserving to a degree, but it's really about maintaining, promoting, and supporting culture. So each of us that work at the repository have quite a bit of length of history in working with our cultural practitioners, and we're going to be working on paths forward to make sure that they feel that this is a welcome space for them as well. Next. And then connected to the university and the museum, as well as the Historic Preservation Office, there are so many ways that this ties into research. Research by, as I mentioned, the cultural practitioners, but also university students, visitors, scholars abroad, scholars on island, community researchers, or families wanting to know more about their land or their village or the island. Next. And then this is another example of the work that we will be supporting is there are over 1,000 archaeological reports. Those reports have limited access and they are very technical in their writing. So by being able to connect with the artifacts themselves, be able to have some access to the associated records, that we hope that, and we will have projects ourselves as well, but to get that information out to the community in a poster like this or other projects that bring it out to the community in other digestible form. So this poster was put together by working with archaeologists, cultural practitioners, horticulturalists, seafarers, the list goes on. And what it did was take that information from their oral archives, it takes it from the archaeological reports, the archaeologists, and it puts it all together. So it can be in a classroom, it can be around the island, it can be in many places, sharing the benefits of that information. Next. And then getting back to the proposed fees themselves. So essentially for the calculations, operational costs, as I mentioned, were at the foremost of this. So we looked at operational costs. They were averaged over 5 years with an estimated 3.5% inflation rate, and then divided by the estimated intake of cubic feet of boxes containing both archaeological and archival collections over the same 5-year period of time. And our goal over the next 3 to 5 years is to keep track of our costs, labor, and other factors to be able to update the fee structure in 3 to 5 years with more real-time understandings of all of the operational costs. However, to ensure that our rates, remain current, every 2 years there will be an automatic 5% increase. This is written into the fee structure. And there is the ability, we can go over just a little bit of these fees in general, but there is the ability, we've done our estimates, and if there is anything that exceeds those estimates in time or material costs, there is the ability to add to that so that they are as cost, gaining our costs back as much as possible. And the final note, just want to emphasize that we really did aim to balance the need for the sustainable funding with the necessity of keeping the cost manageable for the patron. So here we see there are two sets of types of fees. One is related more to the digital images that we will be producing ourselves or that we have coming in as part of the records that will be coming in. And so we did this on a cost analysis of how much labor time that we figured it would take. But when we also have taken into account our Guam resident rate, which most of our patrons were estimating will be Guam residents, then it also brings us to the industry standard. We're right in line with the rates that the Hagåtña Public Library and the Mark Research Library charge for digital images. The other part of this is that we will be having a website with eventually hundreds of photographs. And so we don't perceive as much need really because we're going to make most of what we have freely available. And then again, with the black and white and color images on hard copy paper, this is not full cost recovery, but it's trying to make it affordable for those who still prefer to work in those mediums. And when we look at things like the hour labor that we are charging, again, it was based on our salaries and staying true to those. But when we look at other entities like Arizona State Museum and Repository, they have very recently updated their fee structure. And so just in 2024, so this year, they updated it and they realized that for many, many years, they had been not recovering their costs. And even so, when they did, their hourly rates are $83 an hour, and it was $125 an hour, but we're charging $45. So across the board, pretty much each and every fee, we are less than Arizona State's highly thought out, very recent update of their fee structure. And as we all know, just to throw in one more part, is our costs have to be higher because we have very high shipping costs, but they're getting stateside shipping costs, right? So we feel very confident that we've tried to be very reasonable and responsible to the community by keeping the costs related to the actual costs we're experiencing and within industry standards. And the other one to point out up there is the laboratory fee. So the laboratory fees, those were really hard to calculate. They were all over the place. But we did find laboratory fees, up to $800, up to $1,000. And so again, we tried to keep ours at a reasonable rate. For this, there can be Guam resident rates, there can be student rates, and so it makes it even more affordable by comparison to some of what we saw. And then on the next schedule or structure, this is really for the curation services. And again, we looked very closely at Arizona because it was the most recent and most updated calculation of costs for their updated fee structure. So we are charging $250 plus any legal fees. And if we compare that to the Arizona Repository and Museum, they charge from $750 to $1,000. So we figured that this is going to be a new cost, and and we figure maybe we can put in 5 hours and keep it at about 250. And if we need to go any further, we can with legal fee considerations. Again, it's the same issue that our costs per hour that we're charging are much more affordable than Arizona, who are double and basically about triple the cost of what we're charging. And then also in red, we see what they are charging for some of their curation fees. So their curation fees are quite a bit higher for the permanent deposits. But again, we kept ours at the operational cost because we felt that was the most fair way to calculate it. But we were reassured, as I've mentioned before, that we were well within and not exceeding industry standards. So we felt very comfortable that we were accommodating that. And we also are, as is very common for repositories, going to have a limited term curation. And so for limited term curation, this is charged annually. And so again, annually, it's a lesser rate because it's something that is ongoing. And we did calculate it to fit within our operational costs for the year. So that's essentially the overview. If anybody has any questions or additional thoughts, we can answer them, but I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you very much. Yes. Yes, we want it to be as sustainable as possible. The situation that we have is that we are the repository for the entire island. And so a large part of what we're receiving it from different directions. One is we have 40 years to be grandfathered in. So that's going to be quite a bit of collection. We have the future work that's going to be happening. And so that's when we're going to be able to recover costs as much as possible. It won't cover everything because we do have that 40 years worth of material that's going to be grandfathered in. And the other, which I mentioned, is for private landowners and private developers, we want to encourage them to bring that heritage here, to kind of return it to the people of Guam so that everybody, Chamorros and the rest of the community can access it. But according to law, we cannot charge them for that. So we're following the law and we'll be waiving the fees so that we're hopefully encouraging them to want to bring this over for the benefit of everybody in the community. So we're recovering as much cost as we can per box, but it won't be able to cover everything because we do have those other situations. Yes, yes. Yes, absolutely. And that's there are so many things that are exciting about the repository, but that's one of the things that's so exciting. With these 40 years of collections, we're estimating anywhere between 4,000 to 6,000 or more boxes of these artifacts and records that are coming in. The estimate is that there may be as many as 300,000 artifacts coming our way. And so this is going to be, as was described by one of our staff members earlier, basically this treasure for the island, right? We're going to serve as a treasure box to a degree so that we're going to set up curated exhibits. We're working with the museum and perhaps places at the university where we might have rotating exhibits as material is coming in So that things that have been sitting away for 40 years, things that have been buried for 3,000 or more years, that they will be something that people can connect with, they can see and access. Yeah. Yeah. Well, right now, we're under MARC, as long as the memorandum of agreement stands between the Department of Chamorro Affairs and the University of Guam. And so through Dean Story, who has been working on this for a very long time, which we're very appreciative of, she's been very thoughtful for many, many years. And so we're looking to have this because we are associated with research. So we're looking to have this go to RCUOG and be able to have the funds set aside for our proactive replacement and other operational costs that might not be covered otherwise, and maybe be able to help us carry out some additional research or outreach. But I do also want to mention with what you're saying, the good news is that the government of Guam, including the repository, the museum, and the Historic Preservation Office, we're all actively working with the Bishop Museum, and they are working what they call an ethical return. We don't fit, we don't fit within some of the federal, we don't fit within some of the federal mandates. Like right now in the United States, there are some federal mandates for museums and repositories or others that are holding these collections to return it to the people to whom it belongs. But as a territory, we sit outside of those federal mandates. And so the Bishop Museum, even though federal mandates are not requiring them to, they see that it's the right thing to do. And so we are working on that very return. And one of the things that the repository brings to the community is we now meet international standards, both national and international standards, so that if we work with Spain, if we work with the United Kingdom, they can be assured that they're meeting international standards and return it to where you said it rightfully belongs, or at least a long-term loan that is meant to return it to the people of Guam, and the Chamorros of Guam.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because you're right. It's not only Bishop, but you mentioned Spain, and I know there's something in England too. So a lot of the countries who are able to pass through, or they have information that belongs to Guam. I'm just bringing that up.
Yes.
Okay.
There
That's
is I'd like to pass on. There is a young woman from Spain who is right now working on her PhD, and it is about identifying where these collections are in Spain, but she has also identified some in Germany and in England and elsewhere. So efforts like that, those are on our agenda. That first and foremost, we have to bring what's here on island in. We have to work with places like Bishop Museum, but then we also have to work on identifying what exists where and what can be the path to bring it home.
Yeah, I think that's pretty exciting. And I think if we can bring everything here, it'll be a true picture of the history of Guam, as well as the many families and places that have been affected by it. But thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much.
I don't have any other questions, but anybody else have? Okay. Well, good afternoon, and thank you very much for presenting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
We do have another written testimony submitted by Mr. David Tidinko. I'll just read it on his behalf. Hafa Day, my name is David Tidinko, Chairman of the Board for the Guam Museum Foundation, and I am writing to express my support for the proposed fee structure to be implemented by the Guam Cultural Repository to help ensure the facility can continue its valuable work in preserving and promoting the cultural heritage of Guam. Implementing a fair and sustainable fee structure for users of the facility is an important step in securing the long-term operation, accessibility, and expansion of the resources and services that the Guam Cultural Repository provides. The Guam Cultural Repository plays a critical role in safeguarding the cultural, historical, and artistic legacy of the Chamorro people and the broader community of Guam. By housing and protecting a wealth of artifacts, documents, and other cultural materials, the facility is not only a site for preservation, but also serves as an educational resource, providing invaluable insights into Guam's heritage for residents, visitors, students, and researchers alike. In establishing a fee structure, the repository can continue offering high quality programming, maintain facilities, and support necessary staff and resources while remaining accessible to a broad audience. The proposed fees will serve as a reinvestment in the community as they will allow the GCR to expand outreach efforts, develop educational programs, and support conservation initiatives for future generations. By contributing financially to the facility's maintenance and growth, users can participate actively in the cultural stewardship of Guam and demonstrate the value they place on the preservation of the island's rich history and identity. I am confident that the implementation of this fee structure will be managed in a way that is considerate of the community's needs and will ensure that Guam's heritage remains both accessible and protected. Thank you for your efforts to sustain and support our shared cultural heritage through this initiative. Please do not hesitate to contact me if you have any questions regarding my testimony. Sizuus Maasi, David B. Tidinko.
Yeah, make a note and put that in the record for the hearing. Okay. Are there anybody else who would like to make any testimony regarding our today's public hearing? Okay. Okay. If that's the case, there are no other people.
All right, this public hearing is adjourned at 1:33 p.m. Thank you very much for your time.